Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Tulip in Action, Digitizing Operations for Instant Impact. My name is Natalia. I'll be the moderator for today's session. And in this webinar, you'll get a first-hand look of composable manufacturing systems in practice, modular, flexible, and built to adapt. And you'll see how leading manufacturers are scaling faster, cutting costs, and improving visibility with a composable approach to MES. And I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Kaylee Crothers. Kaylee leads the pre-sales engineering team for North America at Tulip, where she has spent 5 years guiding customers on their digital transformation journey. Leveraging her deep product expertise and a customer-centric mindset, she architects and demonstrates how solutions can improve frontline productivity and streamline operations. Her work ultimately delivers measurable value and drives digital adoption at scale. And now I'll hand it on over to Kaylee.
Thanks, Natalia. Okay, super excited to be here today. Also physically in our headquarters in our Tulip Experience Center. So I'll try to not make everyone nauseous and throw the camera around. This is a really big room that we have tons of different demos, different use cases focused on different industries. So also as part of that package that we send out, you'll get a link to virtual videos of different demos in the space. So plan for today, we're going to walk through some high-level kind of content on what is Tulip's offering, what is composability, how do customers leverage Tulip and ultimately scale Tulip across many sites, various use cases. We'll get into all of that. And we're also going to do a demo. So like I mentioned, we're in this physical space. I'm going to walk through one of our bench tops that we have here through a quality inspection demonstration. We're then going to go into the back end of Tulip, take a closer look at how it was built, and talk about the library, how you would go about building an application like that. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So first, before we get into the demo, I'm pretty excited to talk about our content here today. So like Natalia mentioned, I've been with Tulip for 5 years. I've seen various different approaches from different types of businesses on how they kind of approach continuous transformation or digitizing operations. Regardless of the industry that you're in or the digital maturity that your organization is at, there's always so much room for improvement. So we typically see a mixture of monolithic MES systems working, sometimes integrated well, sometimes not, with a slew of different business systems. So that's your ERP, it's potentially your warehouse management system. And then you kind of have this hodgepodge of other. And your other could be point solutions. So let's say you do a fair amount of machining. You maybe have an OE point solution for asset utilization monitoring. Point solutions can also just include like paper processes in Excel. There is definitely no shortage of complex Excel sheets that manufacturers and really all businesses absolutely run on. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how you think about whatever that landscape is that your site or sites have, and how to think about translating that into Tulip. So at a high level, there's many different complex challenges that customers are looking to solve with Tulip. Here's an example on the screen. I'm sure a lot of you feel these feel near and dear to your heart. So I think workforce turnover has been quite the theme in the last few years. How can we retain this very critical tribal knowledge as you kind of have more senior veteran operators retiring out of the workforce? You're seeing a new wave and generation of labor come through. It's a generation that was raised on iPads. So how can we give them digital systems? Everyone has an iPhone in their pocket these days where you have an app to do something. Why isn't that a reality for manufacturing? So some other challenges: production visibility, quality, inventory. While these are all kind of can rear their head and feel like the most important, they're ultimately connected. No production visibility can be causing pains on the material management side, and quality issues can be, causing or creating more complex, training programs, things like that. So because of the nature of these problems being interconnected, we also take an interconnected approach to how we would solve them. And that's kind of getting more into the intro into the Tulip platform. So here are some areas that you would imagine would be use case areas that would solve some of those problems. So like I mentioned, maybe you have an inventory solution. Maybe you have digital guidance and you're doubling down on How can we get digital work instructions and videos to shorten training time and shorten time to productivity? Or maybe it's asset management. Whatever it is, you have these various areas. And traditionally, this is kind of what served the market. So you have your core MES, think your legacy MES, your monolithic players. Those typically cover kind of those 4 categories, compliance and up. And to manage around that, this is where you see your point solutions, your Excel sheets, just your paper processes start to come together to create the kind of mosaic of solutions that you might have. The Tulip approach is fundamentally very different than that, where Tulip offers one platform, one toolbox, where you can deploy composable solutions that cover these various areas on a value-added timeline. So whatever your kind of most pressing challenge is, you can start there and kind of grow into these other solutions over time. So that is the intro on Tulip, why we exist, what we do. But this is a Tulip in Action webinar. So it's going to be a lot more focused on the actual product. So we're going to start to kind of transition into that now. These are really the 4 components that make up the Tulip platform. So it's a no-code app building platform. So you have the ability to build applications and automations leveraging no-code. We'll get into what that looks like, of course, but think when, if, then, else statements using drop-downs. It's very intentionally designed to feel similar to PowerPoint and Excel, because those are the tools that engineers are very familiar with to get their job done. So that skill set translates very nicely into building applications, building data structures in Tulip. You have a PowerPoint-esque front end for app development, and then an Excel-like database structure behind that. Again, though, you don't need to use SQL. You don't need to understand how joins work. It's done in a no-code approach. A very important product strategy for us is low barrier to entry with high ceilings. So there's also a large opportunity for more complex app development in there as well, and we'll get into that. Now, that's the application side. Connectivity is such an important piece as well. So these applications can be connected to your existing infrastructure in many different ways. So from a system side, supporting integrations to APIs, SQL databases. We're kind of system agnostic, if you will. It's not like there's a list of 25 different ERPs with these specific versions that are supported. It's really APIs and SQL databases. Now, more on the machine side, we support Opus UA and MQTT for both push and pull. So being able to do simple things like hook into your Kepler server, and now you can start visualizing your tags in Tulip, to more complex architectures where maybe you have a data ops platform, you have a UNS, and Tulip is publishing and subscribing to that. Connectivity is also includes tools and devices. So we're going to go through that in our demo today, but we offer a few edge devices where you can integrate to different tools. You can also create your own drivers. We do have a list of pre-built drivers that you can leverage. But again, low barrier to entry, high ceilings. We have an SDK coming out as well. So everything we just talked about everything we just talked about so far creates so much data. You have applications creating data. You've got devices coming in, machines coming in, data from other systems. Tulip does have a built-in analytics engine. So you can create analytics that are displayed. Think your traditional TV that sits above your line, your very quick snapshot into are we winning or losing today, all the way to analytics that can actually be embedded directly into applications. That's really the core components of the platform, and what supports that is what sits around our platform, and that's our ecosystem. So this includes a few different things, but most notably our library. Tulip Library is pre-built applications, pre-built integrations that our customers can download and start using for free. It also has a pre-built data model, which if you are on our knowledge base or on our website, you'll see this language called Common Data Model. It's really just a pre-built structure of about 10 to 15 different tables. We have a few different ones that are kind of industry or manufacturing environment specific that are intended to serve as a starting spot. So our library apps are built on top of those. We'll go through that today, but a really good example of how to think about that is a defect table. Whether you make something the size of this room, or you make something half the size of my fingernail, there's going to be standard things you capture around a defect. A unique identifier, a material ID, a reason from a predefined list. It's kind of an example of how that data structure provides a starting spot, and then it's intended for you to take and scale as you scale use cases, and also as you start to iterate on top of applications. So getting a little bit more into the app building process. Tulip applications are in many ways always living and breathing. They're never kind of quite done. In many ways, Tulip is a continuous improvement tool. And this is the loop that having a no-code platform enables you to leverage. So you have an easy to use, easy to deploy application building engine. So you're able to, and we'll go through this today, we're going to create a quality inspection application. So you're able to throw that together, leveraging library content, and quickly deploy that to the floor. Now what that allows you to do is capture really two things. One, frontline feedback. So that's your simple things like, hey, the computer's here and this button that I always need to press is just too small. Or, I'm on the shorter side, can we move this button? Whatever it may be. So you're really like quality of life points that you can capture from operators and put back into a solution that is huge for managing the change management, for getting buy-in from operators from a cultural perspective. That's a major value driver. And the second piece is your access to quickly capture real-time data. So being able to have an application that supports data capture that allows you to look through your operation through a particular lens, whether that's you are having a certain kind of quality issue. So you're deploying an application to help collect data about that. Okay, we're seeing this part is getting bent backwards over and over. Why? Is there a series of applications that we can deploy to get more data? Can we quickly deploy digital work instructions for that are a little bit more clear? And what that ultimately allows you to do is continuously improve your operations and drive that back into your application and deploy again. So this is really the loop that, regardless of the use case that you're thinking about using Tulip for, or use cases, that you can leverage. So getting into now, what is an application? An application is built for a certain spot in your floor, for a certain process, for a certain set of products. It's really like a single unit that is intended to be deployed in a physical environment. Now, what that application does might be different than what it does on day one at version 1 and what it does on day 100 at version 15. You can see here kind of 4 core offerings of use cases. You get quality use cases, your production management, your digital guidance, and your traceability and compliance. There's really layers to all of those components in all of your Tulip applications. So you'll have you'll have one application that is displaying down your work order and completing back that it's posted there, that it's done back to your ERP. Within that application, you're then probably also getting digital guidance on how to do an assembly or do whatever the process is. You probably have critical to quality checks embedded directly in that. And then through the nature of using a composable tool or a digital tool, you're capturing various traceability. Whether that's just when it was done, who did it, whether you're doing full material genealogy. Those are really all elements that you build out into that app that's intended to be deployed in a physical spot. So just want to take a second to talk about some of those value drivers that we see, or the value that we've seen customers been able to drive. I think that if you're not a Tulip customer and you're thinking about, okay, there seems to be a lot of different use cases and things I could tackle, this is really the way to think about what to do first. Think about a very simple matrix of complexity versus value. Complexity, you should find that middle ground of, not an overly complex, sometimes you categorize that maybe as like a science project-esque use case, but something that's kind of middle of the road and has an opportunity to drive value because applications can be deployed very quickly. So some things here, medical device manufacturer, they were having quality issues. They deployed a set of quality applications. That was kind of their first step they took with the platform. They saw a 70% reduction in defects. Now, once you kind of have that core set out, you can iterate on top of those applications. And that's maybe when you start to bring in production visibility, or you start to bring in training management, where you're tracking skills of operators and things like that. So that's the high level. That's the overview. That's kind of the what is Tulip. And I really want to get into the actual demo now. So I'm going to switch gears and actually share the environment that I'm standing in here now. So like I mentioned, this is the Tulip Experience Center. We have a demo bench here set up that is intended to showcase a quality inspection use case. So let me get just situated. We're going to share 2 screens here. So you should be able to see 2 things now. One of which is the actual Tulip player. So this is what is running an application at this inspection bench. The second is obviously my camera. So we're going to be using devices to test. You can kind of get a view into both views here. So this is the product that this bench supports. It's just a cylinder. And we're going to walk through an inspection use case or inspection demo, and then we're going to take a look into the back end of how this application was actually built. So you can see here, before we even start our application, the first thing we have is a list of various units that are ready to be processed at this bench. This list could be coming from a third-party system. This could be coming from a Tulip table. So depending on what your source of truth is, what your current infrastructure is, Tulip is a very open platform and can pull data and push data in where it's needed for your specific architecture. So first step here, we're going to select a unit that we are going to process. We're going to say begin inspection. We have some information about this, a material ID, the quantity that we're going to inspect. Depending on that material ID, it's going to serve me what that correct inspection is. What are those inspection parameters? And it's really just a 3-step process here. So first step is to go through what an example of just simple visual checks or checklist may be. So it's a very kind of easy to use, simple checklist that we have here with just 2 options, either reject or accept. Now this application is error-proofed really at every single point. So you can see here, if I fail this final inspection, I'm not able to move forward in my application. If I were to, let's say everything pass, I am able to move forward. So different kind of poka-yokes that you can do, depending on the nature of your process. The next step here is we're going to go through and leverage a couple of the devices. So I have a scale back here connected to just this computer. So it's simply just a serial output over USB. We'll go into how we built that when we go into the app editor, but I can throw this unit on this scale. Scale is going to not only output what the result was, but it's going to kind of put it into this visual gauge that we have here and show me what this result is. In this case, pass. So we have a upper lower limit that maybe we're pulling from some quality database, or maybe it's embedded directly in the application, where we're able to very easily display to the operator if this passed or failed. We're also going to be storing this, in the context of what this serial number is, who I'm logged in at, what station I'm at, for a full traceability story. So it looks like we don't have any missing parts. We're within range. That's good news. We can accept that. The next inspection step here is to perform some kind of measurement. So this is another example of a pre-built driver that is offered on the Tulip library. This is just a caliper. If you go to tulip.co/library, you'll see the list of all of our applications, our devices, and our integrations that we offer. So this is one of them. This just has a Bluetooth hub that is integrated to one of our Tulip Edge devices, which you can see here, and very similar story to how we were displaying the scale output. It's going to capture the output of this caliper and do that math for me. Did it pass or did it fail? So in this case, we passed. We're able to move forward. So those are kind of basic Tulip integrations. Those are pre-built. Those are simple. Those are kind of just over serial. You can also do much more complex integrations as well. So this is an example of performing a load test. We have a chamber here on the side of the bench where we could, run this cylinder through a couple different tests. So I'll showcase what that looks like quickly. You'll hear it make some loud noises. Hopefully it's not too loud. But what we're doing here is integrating with a, not out of the box, if you will, device. So some options for that are we have edged base drivers where you can create your own drivers that are native to the player or native to an edge device. We also have Node-RED running on our edge devices. So that is if anyone's familiar with that, it's kind of a visual programming tool where you can also do a whole host of driver development. You're really limited to what the physical outputs are here on this edge device, which, just to name some few, because I know it's kind of hard to see, but GPIO, RS-232, there's Ethernet ports, variety of different ways to integrate with tools. So as I go through and perform, these different tests, you can also see that Tulip is charting what this output is. And again, telling me if it passed or failed. These are examples of custom widgets in Tulip, which we'll also get into, where you can leverage just simple JavaScript to create different visual widgets that you can interact with. In this case, we have analytics. So it looks like we failed our first, we passed our second. I can save these results. And this is the overview of what we did. So we have some inspection results from all the way through visual through our load tests. We are capturing what our result was, what our limits were, who did it, in a scenario that, let's say this inspection is performed over a few shifts. We would have that full traceability. We didn't report any defects, and we can sign off on this inspection. This is an e-signature widget. This can be integrated with a single sign-on for two-factor. If you are in a GXP environment, this is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. You can also leverage RFID badge scans as well. So I'm going to sign off on this, specifically that we completed our inspection and we're done. Kind of kick me to the beginning to inspect another one. So that's an example of what a kind of fully baked quality inspection application might look like. It's leveraging a lot of images, it's leveraging GIFs, there's a lot of device integration. It doesn't necessarily have to be where you start them. So I kind of want to walk you through that story of how you would get from a library application to an application like that. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to open the Tulip editor. So this is actually the environment, when we say no code, that you have access to build these applications and iterate on top of them. So this is the application that we just went through. And you can see how I was mentioning previously, there's very much a PowerPoint flavor here. You kind of see that become true. So everything here is just drag and drop. You have different steps to your application on the left-hand side, very similar to slides in PowerPoint, where each step represents a different UI. You have these different elements that you have access to build out your canvas. So this is an example, is just an image of a scale. So you can embed things like images, videos, you can embed analytics, and then a variety of other widgets that can be leveraged. From an inputs perspective, whether it's fed from a device, machine, or a system, or a manual input, you have these different variable types. So if I wanted, let's say, for someone to take an image of something, I could drop an image widget, I could tag it with a variable, and then I can do something with that variable or with that image. And that's where the logic piece comes in. So if we go to our first step here, we have this very simple get help button, or this reject button. You can see on this button, there's two different triggers, and triggers are what holds logic. So that first reject button says when the button is pressed, run some if condition, and then run some then condition. It's a very simple structure using just drop downs. So let's say if I wanted to add some logic in here right now, let's say to, alert quality, some kind of escalation button. I could, on this button, add a trigger to say, okay, when this button is pressed, I want to execute some action. Now, I'll take a minute to go through the list of options here, but from an if perspective, you have access to anything the app has access to. And from an execution standpoint, it's kind of this list here. So this can be simple things like what we're going to build out, send a text or send an email to either a certain user or a group of users, or it can be more complex, like run a connector function. That could be any kind of transaction against another system, whether it be your ERP or other, or run a device function that could, send some message to a torque tool to load a certain job. And then just simple data storage within Tulip, all the way to AI functions. So from an AI perspective, through your trigger editor, and this isn't the limit of AI capabilities in Tulip, but in the context of triggers, you have access to do OCR from images, to translate directly through apps as well. So if I wanted to, let's say, text someone quality and build that out, I could say, okay, send a SMS to Kaylee. I want to send it to her specifically, and I want to send some kind of message. Now I could do something simple, just a static value, type out what that needs to be, help needed, or I could do something a little bit more dynamic. So this would be an expression, and I could say, help needed at, and then I could leverage the information the application has access to, like the station name. So I could say help needed at, and then dynamically send the station name that I'm at. Oh, be really helpful if I added a plus, save it, and now that's kind of a valid text that will come directly from my application. So that's the basics of how triggers work. I do want to take a second and talk about data. So what lies behind your applications are tables. And this is that Excel piece that I was mentioning. These are very simple table structures that applications can read and write into. So an example of a table that we wrote into from that application was inspection results. Here we have a table structure where we have some unique identifier, important context about the unit, what was the work order, what's the serial number, what's the material, and then inspection data. So what was the type of inspection? Was it complete? Did they follow a procedure? Did they pass? Who did it? Very simple structure that also, if I wanted to extend, I could come in, and if I had the correct permissions, I could come in, pick whatever my data type is, and start writing, data into that table. It's also really important that these tables can be referenced through apps, so for lookup purposes. So if I need to understand, let's say, what the limit should be for a certain inspection, that might be another table where you have your inspection parameter definition, where an application is referencing that and then logging it into a log table. So that is really like the nuts and bolts, the high level of how Tulip application development works, how you can store data, and how you build triggers. So I want to take a second to talk about if we were to go kind of cradle to grave from a library application to this demo that we just went through. When you go to create a new application, you can start from scratch. You can also leverage our AI Composer feature, which is taking a PDF and automatically creating an application from it. Or you have access to everything on the Tulip library. So I pulled down an application from the library called Visual Inspection. And this is exactly how this library app comes. It comes with 3 simple steps and is connected to a series of tables that are part of our common data model. So the first step here is inspect a unit. You can see also there's kind of this little pill note. All of our library apps will have app builder instructions along the way. So it will either explain, what the app is, or give you guidance on if anything needs to be changed within the application, like, a list of defect reasons. You'll have an alert. Make sure you update your list that is valid. So we can delete this for now. And this is how the application comes. It's a very simple canvas area for you to provide instructions, for you to go through a simple checklist. So here we have 2 different checks, which have task 1 and task 2 as variable type, and then functionality or trigger logic to save that. So on this pass button, this is just going to simply store if it's passed or failed into that inspection table that we looked at. The next step is just a very simple confirmation that something is complete. And then there's an alternate path that an operator may go through, but it's not necessarily the primary path of an app. You can see here, report comment is a function that we're giving the operator to in this scenario. This button will take you to this comment step where I could fill out some generic information like some kind of comment and an image and attach that to the unit, either in the context of an inspection or the context of a defect, or however you want to build this out. So if I wanted to, let's say, change this, like I think a description and an image is great, but let's say if I wanted to have maybe an intended team to review this, I could add another input here. Let's call it text. And I could say, intended team to review. Because maybe this is a generic comment that could be for engineering, that could be for quality. Maybe it's even more generic in a quality context or inspection context, and it could be a comment for maintenance or something. So I could add an input here. I could call this variable name. So let's call it, intended team. I very much recommend keeping variables just plain English, plain language, natural language is the way to say it. Tulip in many ways is self-documenting of your process because your apps are such kind of a one-to-one to the physical process that's happening. So there's a lot of opportunity to leverage, just simple, clean naming for things. And this is a good example. So intended team to review. This is now a valid variable. And on my log comment functionality, I could, add that input. So here it's currently just saying, okay, create the record, store all the information that we already have about this. So the work order, the product, the status of the comment we're going to assume will be new, hasn't been reviewed. And then we're storing that comment image. I could do the same thing and come in here and say, okay, data manipulation, store. I want to store the variable that we just created, which is intended team. And I want to store that to the table of the current comment. We don't necessarily have a field to map that to. So, maybe we could just call it type for now. In this form would now send that information to the table. So hopefully that was helpful, giving you an example of kind of what Tulip is, an example of kind of a fully baked inspection demo, and then taking it all the way back to the back end of how these applications are actually built out and how you can leverage that Tulip library to get pre-built kind of operator UI with a pre-built data structure that you can immediately start manipulating and iterating on top of as it's relevant for your operations. So let's transition into the Q&A portion now. I also just want to throw it as we transition. I think I've already said it, but our experience center is open doors. My team, among other folks at Tulip, are always here, willing and able to take folks through this room. Sorry if this gets anyone nauseous, but I'll do a quick turn. It's quite the room here. We have many different demos focused for different industries, different use cases. We're more than happy to host groups and show you the real deal live, opposed to just me clicking through.
Awesome. So yeah, as Kaylee mentioned, we'll transition into the Q&A. So feel free to put questions into the Q&A section. And to start, Kaylee, I think, we talk about this kind of composable approach. One thing, obviously, everyone's wondering is like kind of the return on investment, time spent. So how does creating a composable MES kind of compare to a traditional MES implementation in terms of time?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So from a time perspective, for anyone who has been involved in, and it doesn't just have to be MES, but just your more kind of monolithic S solution. So even if you've been involved in ERP deployment, it's a very lengthy requirements gathering process and customization process that is on the order of months and years, where you have your many different stakeholders. It's laborious in many ways, and best case scenario, in the 12 months to maybe 18 months you spent requirements gathering and then building, in the day that you go live and you flip the switch, like best case scenario is you were 100% right for that window of the last year and a half. And from every day and week on, things will change and your system would not be built to adapt to that. So Tulip is an absolute upside down approach to that, where you start with a small set of use cases or a specific area, and you deploy with an iterative approach. So it is not waterfall. You deploy small units that you then grow in over time. So the biggest point, to Natalia, your question was on value. With Tulip, it's on the order of weeks and months. Our standard onboarding with customers is 60 days. So you're immediately getting value as you're building and scaling, opposed to, best case scenario, you were half right on your requirements gathering with your more monolithic systems.
And we talk about kind of like approaching it from a use case approach. How do you prioritize which use case to start with?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So I kind of gave that framework earlier for your simple scale of like value versus complexity and striking that middle ground. So sometimes customers come and it's like really obvious. They either have, let's say a compliance consideration. Like we have a finding for something and we want a set of use cases that are going to tackle that finding. Well, sometimes those are more obvious on where to start. Before you're kind of generic, we have a lot of paper, we're struggling with on-time delivery, we're struggling with quality, we're struggling with training. Building a set of use cases that pick, whatever those core strategic objectives are. So if it's on-time delivery, on time and full. Okay, so how is production visibility? Do supervisors know actively where they're tracking against a shift to goals? Do you have WIP visibility at a line and a site level? And starting with a set of use cases that kind of support whatever those core and top of mind KPIs are for your organization.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on compliance here, but I think it'd be great to talk a little more through that, like as we're looking at industries that are highly like regulatory, something like aerospace, kind of what can Tulip do in that compliance use cases?
Yeah, a lot. So it's kind of like it's kind of two sides of the coin. One is you have an incredible solution to poke-yoke and error-proof and really do it right the first time mentality through what your system that you build will support. And then on the second hand, it's more of the audit trail. So we have immutable records that are attached to everything in Tulip that can be leveraged for for audits. You can pull them. We offer a set of features and functions that are really geared towards GXP environments and also aerospace. So that would be, providing e-signatures that require two-factor authentication. So there's kind of two sides to that coin.
Yeah, and so we're, talking about having people build apps. How do you help train kind of citizen developers to build apps?
Yeah, there's a couple different models. So we do have an in-house services team that can help distill best practices, teach you solution design, also can take on different formats of kind of building for you and taking them with you on the journey and training you, or different formats where we're kind of training you out of the gate. We also have a partner network that's available. And then there's kind of a net that sits under all of that, which is our ecosystem and our resources that are all free. So that's library, that's our university, our knowledge base. There's been a lot of investment in that self-serve content, given the nature of the platform.
Yeah, and kind of to Kaylee's point, like for our library, a lot of that content can tackle not only your use case, but kind of specific to your industry, something we're seeing a lot for aerospace, for automotive, for industrial manufacture, something, kind of tackling that use case, but through that lens. And so I think with that, that's all the questions we have for today. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us as the Tulip team. And Kaylee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.